Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Brian Zelmer from KU Presents in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, and I'm with my friends, Josh
Benson, rocking it out from Marion, Illinois.
Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
Kevin
Maynard, Quad City Arts, splitting the border between Iowa and Illinois.
And Katie.
Hi there, Katie Miller with the Midland Center for the Arts in Midland, Michigan.
So this week, my interview is with someone here right in my backyard, John Ernesto, who's run the very popular Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest for many years, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But I have a question for all of you after talking with him. Have you ever been working with an artist and just suddenly it clicks with you, like, this is an unreal, like, I can't believe I'm here right now moment, you know, where you just kind of step out of your body and you're like, this just seems too awesome to be happening. Like, I can't believe this is happening.
I'm lucky enough that that's happened a few times for me, but the first time where I really felt struck by it was with Peter Frampton. The entire concert felt unreal to see it on the stage in front of me, you know, and to have worked on it and got it in it there. So Peter Frampton was the one that really shaped it for me.
Nice.
Mine was probably when I booked Kevin Smith at the theater. Just, you know, growing up seeing his movies and then seeing like his recorded An Evening with Kevin Smith, and then to have that in the venue and to be the guy who was running the microphone, like it was sort of an out of body experience. The best part about that was he did refer to me as the OG Kevin, which at that point I was like, well, it's time to retire. This is it. So
I started watching The Daily Show when I was in high school. And one of the guests that like really struck me at that point was Bassem Youssef. And his story is so inspiring. His comedy is so funny. And seeing him speak at APAP, I was like, this is incredible. I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe I'm here and I'm hearing these stories and everything. And then a few years later, we had the opportunity to bring him in for a performance. And we were doing the advance. And, you know, the management company's like, he's real easy. Like, you need a projector, you need a podium. And we were like, no, we advance everything fully. Like, it doesn't matter. We're going to, like, we do everything. We cross all the T's. And so like, I was like logging onto the Zoom with Bassem Youssef. And I was like, that was the moment where I was like, this is happening.
Brian, I have two from my time at Interlochen. First was the cast of Dancing with the Stars. We had the tour into our big amphitheater, and just being backstage with dancers I've watched on TV for years and years and years, and having a chance to chat with them, I was like, what is happening right now? And then I worked with Chris Thiele twice at Interlochen. Once he came and toured with Nickel Creek, and then one toured with Bela Fleck. Those were two kind of experiences that I will never forget. Some of my favorite artists I admire so much. Chris is a really great guy. So if you ever have a chance to present him, highly recommend. But yeah, so Dancing with the Stars and Chris Thiele.
I've been fortunate to have many of those experiences too, where I'm like pinching myself because I can't believe I'm really there. And I know this was my question, so I'm having a hard time answering my own question. Since comedy was such an important part of my life growing up, and Saturday Night Live in particular, I think I'm going to go to the first time I worked with an SNL cast member. It was Jon Lovitz. And the pinch me moment was actually before I even got in person with him. I got this call on my cell phone from an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer it, but I did. And it was Jon Lovitz. And I go, hello, this is Brian. Can I help you? And he goes, hi, this is Jon Lovitz. And I'm like, oh, hi, Mr. Lovitz. What can I do for you? Oh, please call me John. And I said, oh, thank you, John. What can I do for you? Mr. Lovitz. And we both laughed. Like, it was such an old timey joke. Like I laughed and he laughed, and then we got to whatever he needed. But it just, you know, that was just one of the many times that I was like, I can't believe that just happened right now. And, you know, it was just between us. Anyway, I brought up this question because when I spoke with John, he talks about an experience of listening to something as a kid that really impacted him. And then many years later, he realizes he's standing backstage watching this artist perform, and it was just an out-of-body experience. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with me and John Ernesto.
Hi, this is John Ernesto, General Manager and Artistic Director for the Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest. For the last 32 years, been involved with the festival since its beginning in 1991.
Wow, welcome, John. It's really great to sit down and have a chat with you.
Thanks, Brian. Looking forward to it.
So for the listeners, you and I have partnered together for the 7 years that I've been here. but your partnership goes back longer to my predecessors.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure, and we can get into this later on when you started working with community partners such as KU Presents. But first, I want to hear a little bit about what Jazz Fest is for those who maybe don't know about it.
Sure. The Boscov Berks Jazz Fest is it's presented by Berks Arts. It's a nonprofit in Reading, Pennsylvania. The Visitors Bureau, which was part of the Chamber of Commerce, and the a few hotels in the Wyomissing area of the town. And the goal was to create a cultural tourism event in traditionally a slow period for hotels. So the executive director at that time was Bill Royston, and he had some experience in presenting music in Philadelphia. So he approached the Berks Arts Council at that time about starting this Jazz Fest. And they came to me. I was the marketing director at the Reading Eagle.
Okay, the Reading Eagle newspaper.
And the newspaper in town. And I knew everybody who was started trying to put this together. They asked me to get involved from a marketing standpoint and get the newspaper's blessing and backing, which we did. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got involved with this. I've been involved since the beginning. I became like assistant general manager in the third year Bob Kerper was his name, to kind of steady the ship. Then in the fourth year, they approached me about taking over as general manager. And I said, yeah, why not? I never booked a band.
So Bill was booking the first couple of years.
He booked the first 2 years. Then he left. Mm-hmm. Then there was someone, it was they brought somebody in from Pittsburgh to do it.
So starting out something brand new like that, and for those who don't know, it's a huge event now going on for 32 years.
This will be our 33rd.
33rd, yeah. Wow. So I mean, it's enormous, and it's known far and wide within the jazz community, especially. And but the first year when you're putting it out the first time, do you remember what your marketing approach was to get the community involved?
Well, at the beginning, it was kind of focus on marketing to the community, make the community aware of it. And
when you say marketing to the community, in what ways?
Through the newspaper, radio, and TV that we had connections with. At that time, the newspaper was very strong, a large subscription, so there's a lot of readers. So that's how we spread the word and try to give it some credibility in the community.
If you don't mind, I want to dig a little deeper into the marketing of that,
sure,
because we do get into the business of this. So was the marketing approach more of just like your usual advertising, or was there a lot of PR element into it?
It was a mixture. It was a lot of print.
Okay.
A lot of print from an advertising standpoint, a lot of print from editorial content.
Okay.
And I mean, it's well before the social media days. Yeah. But we had strong radio partners in other markets in Philadelphia. WRTI was our official radio station from the very beginning.
Were there other big festivals like this in the jazz genre at that time, or?
Well, in this part of the country, there were some that were in Philly, but for some reason, Philadelphia could never. And to this day, I get asked, why does this work in Reading, Pennsylvania?
Yeah,
and we don't have a festival in Philadelphia. I just think it's because the community, the size of our community, came together and made it work. For whatever reason, it connected in Reading. It took time. I mean,
it just like any new business, they say it takes 3 to 5 years to really start making profit. Yeah. At what point did you see like it really growing to the size that you guys envisioned?
Well, when I took over in the fourth year, I said to the team at Berks Arts, and I said, I have a lot to learn. I said, I've never booked a band, but I've been involved in a lot of community events, running events. So I had confidence in myself, be able to coordinate and run an event, build a team around it. So I had to learn quick on the booking side. So I relied on a lot of conversations with people, agents and stuff. And,
I want to get into that and how you do the work now even. But first, I think it'd be helpful to find out your background. So you didn't really have a jazz background, I know, in conversations with you, but I know you did listen to a lot of music and were a very deep listener, if I remember correctly. Can you just talk about maybe your upbringing through music and how it's evolved?
Sure. I loved all kinds of music, but I love Motown. I used to go see Motown when I was in high school. When I got out of high school, I used to travel to Philly to see it. So I loved the Motown sound. I loved Joni Mitchell and that all kinds of different music. And I got hooked on listening to instrumental jazz by Dave Brubeck in 1966. I started listening to his albums, and I really liked it. And I just got hooked on it. And did I ever think I'd be getting involved in this business? No. So, but it's old music has always been part of my life. Then when I met my wife back in the 70s and we got married, she's even a bigger music fan. I mean, she grew up going to Philly Folk Festival, going to the Main Point. So music has been part of our life now for 46 years.
Right.
And that's been really cool. I mean, it makes it, I mean, she knows more about music than me sometimes.
And just to be clear, while you were working at the newspaper and taking over as the general manager of this festival, you were doing both for many years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I did it as a volunteer. When I got involved with the Berks Jazz Fest, I was a volunteer. And fortunately, the Reading Eagle, the publisher, Bill Flippin, saw the value of getting involved in the community. So he gave me a green light to do it. And I worked hard, but I managed to keep both jobs separate. And it taught me a lot about work ethic. So,
and then eventually you retired at the Eagle.
Yeah, I worked at the Reading Eagle for 49 years. I became, the last 30 were as marketing director. I left in 2014. I retired. So.
But you kept on doing.
So I retired from that, but I mean, I had a full-time job waiting for me, even though people don't think it's a full-time job. As you well know, it can be a full-time job.
It's a big festival, and currently it lasts for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's 10 days. It starts on like this year. It starts April the 5th.
Was it like that from the beginning?
No, it was just 3 days. The first couple were the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. When I took over, I said, let's explore opportunities and to grow it. What really changed the festival, and I credit this for being the reason why we're still in business. In the mid-'90s, with the advent of smooth jazz radio, contemporary jazz, we were situated in a market that was close to Philly, and they wanted to hitch their wagon to a festival, and they were launching that format. And they became a marketing partner of the 10th degree. I mean, it was amazing. Every time they had all the on-air personalities. Every time they played a record, hey, David Sanborn, you see David Sanborn at the Berks Jazz Fest coming up, da-da-da-da. It was constant. You couldn't buy that. And all of a sudden, we went from 3 days of playing small rooms to opportunity to play bigger venues and present artists who could sell tickets, volumes of tickets. We were booking bands like the Rippingtons that were selling 1,200 seats at the Scottish Rite. Al Jarreau, we sold 1,600 seats at the Raja Theater downtown. So our whole business model changed. So when we got to the 10th year, things were starting to really gain momentum. I suggested that why don't we celebrate the 10th anniversary with a 10-day festival?
Wow.
So the hotels loved the opportunity because it gave them 2 weekends. So we did it with the idea of coming back the next year to 4 or 5 days. Well, we never went back, and we have never looked back. And so then it's just been 1 year after another. It's funny, here we are at 33, and I look back in those days, and it was constantly looking forward. You never took a time to really review what you did, other than just for business purposes, but you're always looking at the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And I really never, until recently, took time to do a retrospective and look back and, wow, we did this, we did that, we presented. It's been an amazing journey. That's all I'll say.
It's incredible. And what year, looking back, would you say was the pinnacle year, like where just everything, not just a huge attendance, but just everything ran smoothly? And
I mean, all of them had their own distinctness about them. I think some shows that we did, I'll remember forever. So,
you want to name just a couple?
Yeah, sure. We did Bela Fleck and the Flecktones with Bruce Hornsby.
Nice.
It was the first time that Jeff Coffin toured with them. And it was an amazing show. It was like 3 hours, but Bruce Hornsby playing with the Flecktones, it was really special. We did a show with Chuck Loeb, the guitarist, that became a very good friend of mine through the festival, and we kind of created this bond and partnership where we would sit down and dream up special concerts, special presentations. And Chuck would be a musical director of them. So we came up with this, we want to do a tribute to Wes Montgomery. And it turned out to be a magical night. It's an amazing night. It was 7 guitar players. It was Chuck, Pat Martino, Jimmy Bruno, Larry Carlton, Paul Jackson Jr., Earl Klugh, Russell Malone Jr.
Wow, what
with
a
killer with a killer rhythm section. And Wes's son came from Indianapolis for it. Everybody, all the artists. There was like no egos. Backstage, it was like a love fest. And the fact that many of these guys got to play with Pat Martino, it just made their day. And the show was amazing. I mean, it just went off well. Chuck did an amazing job putting it together. And it's probably right up there, top 2, 3, 4, whatever. So presenting Dave Brubeck was a highlight to me.
Sure.
I mean, having the man who got me started listening to instrumental jazz, and all of a sudden I'm standing backstage on the curtains watching him play, and I said to my wife, I said, hit me. This is like,
those are like out-of-body experiences. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I just presented Dave Brubeck.
So the festival's grown. It's been something that the community's rallied around. It's I would call it an economic driver for the 2 weeks that it's here.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you get a lot of response from businesses over the years about how it's helped the community, or people wanting to step up because they see the good that it's doing beyond just the festival itself?
Yeah, absolutely. It took a while to get the support of the community grew. There were different title sponsors, but there have been studies that it impacts the community, somewhere between 8, 10, $12 million economic impact, for 10, which is pretty amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. And the hotels, everybody looks forward to it. They want it to continue. So,
like anyone else, I'm sure the audiences have changed since the pandemic, and things have gotten shaken up. But let's just focus on the period before the pandemic for a minute. So I'm sure you evaluate your audiences.
Oh, absolutely.
And you see returning audiences. About what percentage during that period before the pandemic would you see new people come in versus how many people would return year after year?
It was continuing to grow. I mean, we had our studies and our tracking showed that we were tracking fans from 30-some states.
Wow.
People came from Europe. We had people come from Switzerland every year. There's someone to this day, he comes from Holland every year. We had people from Italy. We had people from Australia. Somebody came from Australia just to see Chuck Loeb.
Wow.
Because he took an online lesson with him. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah, the audiences continue to grow as the contemporary jazz model grew. We grew. There was a time where we had radio partners in Philly, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, in Virginia Beach, and New York.
That is quite a radius.
I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yes.
But they were playing. They wanted to get involved with our festival at that time because it fit their format.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously that all has gone away, but that was the foundation that built a fan base. It's still out there.
Sure.
It's an underserved fan base because of the radio industry has changed, but it's still out there.
So you started to talk about how you book the shows before and how you learned that process. Can you just talk about how you started booking shows, how you kind of came into that, and how you evolved to what the process is you take today?
Yeah, when I started, I learned by just getting a blank piece of paper and lay out the program, the shows, and just figure out, okay, what kind of music, what style we want to put in there, etc. But as the festival grew, where you were doing multiple shows on days, now we're doing 40 shows over 10 days. So you start programming. Now we program, obviously, with different genres in mind. So, for instance, if you have 5 shows on a Saturday, well, you can't have the same genres going. So you stagger them, how they fit into the format. So,
did you look at other festivals to get ideas?
Well, it was hard looking at other festivals because there weren't many like ours the way we do. A lot of festivals are 2 or 3 days, 2 stages, 1 stage, whatever. So it's, you put 5 acts on, and you move on down the road. Here we have a show at the Miller Center or at Kutztown, at one at the hotel, one at a performing arts center. So how they all mix so everyone's successful, and then how does the audience decide where to go? For instance, on the weekend, like this year, the first Saturday this year, I think we have 6 or 7 shows going on at different venues across town and different genres.
That's got to be hard for the patrons to decide which ones to choose.
I always believe that we had to have a diverse festival. Because you can't just do one style of music. One style. Jazz is a big umbrella, is a big tent. So I decided that I just said we got to make it very diverse, so we appeal to a lot of different audiences. It's worked out. As years go on, it gets a little more challenging because the ability for artists sell tickets. The pool for those artists is getting shallower because time's marching on. I'm sure you well know. So
Yes.
When I started checking around to learn as much as I could about programming and booking artists, the one thing I was hearing a lot from old festival people or even some agents and stuff is that, don't get too close to the artists. And I couldn't understand that. So I took a direct opposite approach. I had a simple mission statement. We don't need a word salad mission statement. Our mission is simply take care of the artists, take care of the fans, and everything else will take care of itself. It's been my motto, for the last 33 years. I started getting feedback from artists I asked their thoughts on programming, how they could fit in, or that led to relationships with people like Chuck Loeb, who embraced the opportunity to be involved in a festival to present ideas, because they don't get that every place.
Right.
And it went on to Gerald Veasley's been into festivals every year since 1992. He's very intricately involved in programming and being part of the festival. And Rick Braun, who's from Allentown, is the same way. I've been very fortunate. I developed a lot of relationship with artists who I can call on, pick their brain, and who and talk about ideas and concepts. So I cherish that.
Now, I know you go on jazz cruises as well, and you've developed even stronger relationships with a lot of artists.
Yeah. I work at it every day, not so much programming, but just learning, paying attention to what's going on in the business, talk to people. I would ask agents, what's coming up next year? I would find out things ahead of time. They would trust me, then I could take a shot at it. You have to work at it.
For the shows that you book, how far out do you work at it now?
Probably a year. We start booking for the next festival towards the end of this current one. There was times when I had stuff booked before the festival for the following year, like an artist like Wynton Marsalis, and they plan their schedules well in advance. So I would do my homework, check on their, and then we get a deal done. And it's
So you've also added a lot of local participation, and just when did that come about? And can you talk about how that fits into the festival?
Well, again, when I thought I wanted to grow the festival to become more of a community event, having bars and restaurants, clubs, churches have events. And we built that over the years, and it got to the point where one year we had 100 events, community-free events. I always believed that, it has to become a community event. It just can't, you got to get everybody in the community involved. And that led to doing concerts with the Reading Symphony Orchestra, doing concerts with the Reading Pops Orchestra to build them into the festival, some local big bands. And it led to relationships with Kutztown, they're doing it. I would sit back and I say, well, they're doing a jazz series. They're doing a series. Why don't they do a jazz event during, and we all win,
Yeah.
It's a good partnership. And you've been great. But it's important. We did stuff at Albright College. We do stuff at RAC. To me, everybody has to be involved, and it becomes a win-win. And they feel part of it, that when it gets here, they're excited.
That's great. So through the pandemic, everybody that was in the performing arts tried different things. Some people just paused. Some people, did some really out of the box things. I know you took your whole season, essentially, that got canceled in 2020, and you moved it to the following August. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we canceled 2 weeks before the festival in 2020.
Because those people that don't know, your festival's, has it always been the end of March, early April?
Yes, yes, it's always been.
So changing it to August just, is a huge, crapshoot, if I can say that.
Yeah, it was a crapshoot.
But it was nice that you were able to then book all the artists, though, and still continue that relationship with them.
It was amazing. When we canceled 2 weeks before the festival in 2020 when everything shut down. We originally rescheduled for spring of 21, but as the year went on, we knew this was not going to happen. So then we looked at, so now what do we do? So we looked at windows in August that worked for the hotel was hosting the shows, the other venues, and of course the artists. And I worked tirelessly on the phone trying to make this work, but we were very fortunate that all the major artists, we lost, 4 shows that we had to reschedule. But for the most part, everybody came back in the same days, the same venues.
Wow.
So it was just a matter of updating it. It was pretty amazing updating the tickets, but the COVID years took some years off my life, but we got through it and we kept it going. It was challenging in August of 21. Then we came back in the spring of 22 with another festival.
So it's a shorter period.
Yeah. So it was like, bang, it was nonstop. And then we had a year till 23. And so, but the COVID took a real toll on everybody.
On all of us. Yeah.
And that's why we really wanted to make sure the festival continued so we could do the festival and the artists, everybody got back to work. So, they were tough. They were tough years.
So are there any effects, any ripple effects that the current model of the festival now has changed in a way because of the pandemic?
The model's still the same. It's 10 days and the fans are back for 21 in August. People came back, but there was a lot of familiar faces that didn't come back.
Sure.
And in 22, they started to come back. And in 23 was back to, I would consider as close to normal as possible.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. People came back. So, because at that time we didn't know who was coming back, because our audience is like a lot of performance series. It's an older audience. It's an older ticket buyer, and
so what's the sustainability model for that to attract the next generation of people?
Well, we have a pretty robust education program called Get Jazzed, which is just a small piece of it. It's great that we're working with kids and getting them into the music, and hopefully they become ticket buyers down the road. The key thing is constantly trying to bring in younger artists who are very active on social media, who have their own marketing plans. They have skin in the game, I call it, and help grow their career. Because when the Rick Brauns and all these guys who were very popular now in their mid to late 60s, they had that smooth jazz radio stuff. You couldn't buy that, what they did, the exposure they got, and it created fan bases for them. All that's gone.
Right.
So the younger artists have to find their own path, a new path through social media, through online listening. It's a different game.
You and I have had conversations where you sort of alluded to before about the wide umbrella that you put jazz music in, where some people may not even call some of it jazz.
I know, exactly.
So, I think that may help too. It's just speculation. But.
Yeah. When you said about some people don't consider it jazz, when we went to the contemporary side, the jazz purists really came down on us, and particularly me, and they came down unfairly on the artists because the style of music played. They were amazing musicians who all classically trained, everything else, but because they played that style of music, they would get killed. And there's great stories out there about Pat Metheny ripping Kenny G and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I hated the term smooth jazz. Everybody was getting put in the pockets and brands, but to me, jazz is blues, jazz is big band, jazz is gospel, jazz. There's fusion jazz, there's straight ahead jazz, there's fans, there's people who love fusion jazz, and there's fans who don't like it. I have friends who love traditional jazz, but they started listening to this stuff and they opened their eyes and their ears, and now they like that kind of music, or they listen to it. They don't look down on it,
The long-term name of the festival is Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest.
Right.
Can you maybe just tell us how that developed and how it still continues today?
Sure. The first title sponsor was VF Factory Outlet in Reading. They were 5 years. Then MedEd came on board. They were a big sponsor for many years, which became ultimately First Energy. VF came back on to get us to the 20th anniversary. And then I approached Albert Boskov about coming on board, and he did around 2010. And they've been title sponsors ever since.
Those outside the region may not have heard of Boskov's, but they are a huge supporter of all kinds of community events. And
very much so.
Give back a lot.
The Boskov family has been, when they get a store in a community, they embrace the community. And they have 54 stores now in a business where retailers are going out of business. They're expanding. But so they've been a great sponsor and a great friend. Albert truly believed in building a Reading community, and he thought the Jazz Fest, that's the reason we have a Blues Fest. He asked me, can we do some other kind of festival? And then we started a blues festival in the fall. So Boskov's has been with us for, I guess it's 13 years now.
John, I appreciate you sitting down with me. And before we started recording, you told me some news. Do you mind sharing what that is?
Oh, sure. This is my 34th year with the festival, and I decided that I'm going to step down at the end of this festival. It's been an amazing journey. I have so many memories to cherish and people to thank. I mean, it was a family. We created a family. The people who worked on the festival became family. Volunteers, everybody worked together, and I loved that. It was a coalition of the arts community, the business community, the volunteer community. It was challenging at times to keep it all together, but we managed to do that. So I'm very thankful and appreciative of everybody who pushed and shoved and tugged to keep it going. And I have a lot of great memories. And as I said to Dad, somebody asked me about it, and I said, my rearview mirror is full of people who I love and cherish and who had skin in the game and just made this happen, you know. But I was just part of it.
After being here for 6 years and knowing you and getting to work with you for this time, you can't separate Jazz Fest and John Ernesto. I mean, you are Jazz Fest, and you're so integral to the festival for so many years. And I'm happy for you to be able to go on to the next chapter and be able to maybe just enjoy being a patron now at these festivals. But I'm also a little worried or concerned. Is there any kind of talk about secession or what's going to happen?
There's plans, discussions going on. I know I've become the face of the festival, but people who really know me know that I never go on stage to present or to introduce anybody or introduce a band. I've always tried to maintain a lower profile, which is, it's tough to do after 37 years.
Publicly, you have a low profile during the festival, but behind the scenes all year long, you're working at, you support artists, the jazz artists in particular. Yeah. And that's the piece that, as you mentioned before, that a lot of thinking isn't to be so supportive of those artists. It's more about how can we make money or get more people here. And that's, unfortunately, that's a lot of people's approach. And so I think that's what's going to be missed the most, probably.
I told everybody, Berks Arts, everybody, hotels for years, the one thing we can never let happen, we can never let greed get involved and seep into this, because that would be the end of it, you know.
John, I have a time machine, and I'm going to bring you back now to right before you got approached to join the first Jazz Fest. Do you have any advice or even just some kind of encouragement or something that you would want to tell yourself at that time?
Always listen, take advice, and listen to other people. You got to keep an open mind and a willingness to explore options and other things. Think outside the box and build good partnerships. I've had an open mind with other venues and places, events, and they'll call me and say, well, this artist is playing your festival, but I want him to play here, but the geographic things in the contract. And, I look at it and I say, they're going to play a place that's 100 people? I thought, we're fine with that. Why would I want to eliminate an opportunity for an artist over a geographic clause? It really doesn't make sense in the big picture. And the one thing I would tell people is that everything has to be win-win. If you do not enter into a partnership with someone and you're not thinking win-win, it's not going to succeed. And that's how I approach KU Presents and you. It's a win-win. It's not about Berks Arts making more money. Hopefully you make more money by being partners with us. It's enhancing the festival, what KU Presents does, and build a show into the festival. It helps everybody. We get to present Lakeisha Benjamin this year on our festival, thanks to you and the partnership. So everybody wins. That's what it's all about. It has to be partnerships. And if you have that win-win attitude, or Gerald Veazey always tells me, John, you're one of the few people I know has that can-do attitude. And so I just try to be positive and get things done. So.
Well, John, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you these 6 years, and I've learned a lot from you, and I'm really inspired by your artist-centered approach, and I just hope to continue that on in my career. So thank you for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and good luck with the podcast, and good luck at KU Presents.
Bryan, thank you for bringing John to our podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation because it was sort of a different aspect of our industry, and just talking about the festival environment. I thought it was really interesting thinking about the way that he has to like format those days and format like what's going on at the same time to make sure that, you know, he essentially doesn't have two artists that are competing with one another. And I think that that's even more interesting because, you know, when you think about something for like jazz, for most people, like they think, oh, it's jazz. So like there is one, you know, sort of thing, but there's just so many different styles and genres within that it does take some really good proper planning on that front. So I thought that was interesting, and honestly something that I'd never really had considered because I've never worked in that festival environment.
The thing that struck me too about in the very beginning of this interview was the advice he had gotten early in his career about not making friends with the artists. And I just can't imagine, one, somebody giving that advice, but two, like how would you have a second season?
But I can see that side of it. Like give them the respect and the honor. Don't be try to be too chummy or too friendly with them, and just let them be that artist. I mean, I can kind of see that side of it, but I would rather just treat somebody like a regular person and just have a conversation with them anyway.
Because that's usually how they want to be treated anyway.
Correct.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the conversation around kind of the changing jazz landscape over the last 30 years. I thought that was really interesting. And how do you navigate that as a presenter in a festival setting like this? And then also the conversation about changing media markets and support from newspapers and radios, and how that has shifted a lot. And you know, John's been doing this for 30 years, but he seemed very hip to the fact that like social media is where it's at now, and artists have had to really change how they connect with audiences. So I thought that was a really fascinating, like very long-term look at how that has shifted and impacted this, you know, long time music festival.
We had Kenny G for his Christmas show a few years ago. My wife really wanted to watch it, so then I wanted to go and watch it with her. He played the soprano sax for a couple of songs, but then he had his tenor sax out the majority of the time. And he did like a full like history of jazz as he played through it. And it was one of the most engaging concerts I've ever been to. And so I had to throw down for Kenny G really quick just because I didn't want to see it. And I was so glad I did, because it was an amazing concert that literally, like, he's an amazing master of the craft and of his instrument. And when promoting that show, we had people say, well, yeah, but that's not real jazz. And so that is still there. It's still a thing. But smooth jazz brought so many people in the 80s and the 90s into jazz music overall that it was that like bridge point that made it more accessible. His concert is an active counterpoint to that. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah. So just like switching gears a little bit, one of the things that I've loved about like being a part of this podcast and listening to all these interviews is all the great advice that I've heard and that I've carried with me. And this interview, I think, gives me a little piece of advice that's in the top 5 that I've heard so far. It was towards the end when he said, take care of the artists, take care of the audience, and everything else will take care of itself. I love that.
Yeah.
Best mission statement ever.
Yeah. I mean, that should be the mission statement of all of us.
I also agree with John when he said partnerships should be a win-win.
Alongside that, be positive and get things done. Boom. And loved how he ended that. That was really also a great piece of advice.
So I'm really intrigued by him saying that he wanted to stay off stage, not make himself the face of anything, but then you saying, no, like John Ernesto is the festival, and it is that they're so closely aligned.
Well, because John is such a force in the community all year long. When you say the Berks Jazz Fest, you think of John Ernesto, and vice versa. When you talk about John Ernesto, you think of the Jazz Fest in this community. And because of what he's done and how incredible he is. So I may have confused people. I confused myself listening back because I start off talking about 7 years and then I talk about 6 years, because the first year I came here, the jazz show with Berks Jazz Fest was already booked. But I worked with him I've known him and worked with him for 7 years now, but I've booked 6 shows with him.
Speaking of number of shows, he was talking about 40 shows over 10 days, but then at one point he also mentioned like 100 community events one year.
The way it works is there's directly presented or produced by like the 40 or so by the festival itself. And then there's so many community partners, like he was talking about churches and clubs and bars and like all these other events that they, those individual people will produce a show that they can then tie into the festival, and the festival will help promote it. They put it on their website and blast it on social media and everything else. And it's all part of the festival. So there are shows in the 10 days.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's what I was curious about, because I heard those 2 different numbers and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. That's amazing.
It is amazing.
It is. I think that just calls back to a comment that Joshua High made in the conversation we had with him recently about art being a part of the DNA of a community. Like, thanks to John's work and all of the other volunteers, like this festival is a part of this community, and it's just demonstrated by all these other events and people really wanting to see it succeed. Plus the economic impact of that festival on the community over the course of those 10 days, like that's really impressive to me, and just a great example of how to really build something for your community and with your community.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, John, but I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, because when he mentioned the economic number, that would have been a good number for even just a yearly, like a program that happens all year. But the fact that it's only 10 days and it has that kind of impact is just incredible.
Yeah, I did really find it interesting, him talking about not having something like that in Philly. And he was like, like the community really rallied around this. And I always think about that, sort of working in a smaller community and having people come here be like, how does this happen here? And it really is. I mean, it's people in the community, it's organizations that go, yeah, we love this idea, and get behind that, which allows us to do things that may not seem possible or may seem like, like it's too big for the area that we are currently in. So I thought that was really interesting. Just a good way to sum that up.
Reading is a small city too. So not many people know about Reading, Pennsylvania, but it's about the same, almost identical population as the Quad Cities, Kevin. So that gives you an idea of the scale that we're talking about compared to Philadelphia, which is like an hour plus away, is one of the major cities. So the fact that it can work there is also, testament to how the community came together.
Yeah.
And I'm still like tapping back to our conversation earlier about being friends with the artists. He has ongoing discussions with the artists after they've performed there to pitch ideas and concepts to them and give them an ongoing feeling of connection and ownership to the festival itself. Even if they're not playing that next year, they still have a sense of ownership of it because they've been brought into the conversation with ideas and concepts about it. That is so incredibly cool. And a great position as a leader, great way to get other great minds in jazz thinking about your festival and having input on it. Just so impressed by that.
Well, friends, I want to thank John again for taking time to sit down with me and congratulate him for such an amazing career and building such an incredible festival and putting, this region on the map across the globe. And I also wish him the best in the next chapter and can't wait to see him and host him as a patron next year. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time here on There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh, wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
I almost said the wrong last name.
I thought you were going to say John Lovitz.
I almost said John Lovitz.
John Lovitz.
I thought you were going to.
Bryan and I watched him at APAP together.
Yeah, that was a great one.
What if you guys were sitting right next to me?
They were?
Just saying, what if?
Oh.
I mean, very well could have been.
Yeah, I mean, we all probably were at conferences together before and didn't know it. I mean, very well could have happened. I was off by myself up in Michigan doing my thing. You guys didn't like me then.
Didn't know you then. There's
I'm
a
kidding.
very big difference
I'm kidding.
between not liking somebody and not knowing they exist.
I know. I'm joking.
No, I didn't like you then.
She's networking too well. Like, we don't like her.